the February 2025 ACAP webinar, and I am thrilled that we are going to hear from a number of speakers who are authors in a book by Ashish Goel, our representative, one of our representatives in India, and the book is titled Doctors Do Cry. I'm very excited to hear about this. As a author myself, it's always fun to be able to include voices from many people in our books. And this is very special because now we're going to hear some of the voices from the books. I do want to say that I am thanking, in addition to ACAP, the Barbara Cox Anthony Endowment for Aging at the University of Hawaii at Manoa, which to help support these webinars. So I'm going to tell you a little bit about the Active Aging Consortium, Asia Pacific, and this is a group that we call ACAP. We abbreviate as ACAP. And our mission is to share friendship and best practices for active aging. We're 20 years old this year, and it's all based on friendship. There's no dues to join. These are just friendly gerontologists from around the Pacific, Asia Pacific region, and we just want to learn from each other. And we do that through publishing a quarterly bulletin. We have monthly webinars, and we get together at conferences. You can see back pre-COVID, we got together at a lot of conferences, but they're not as common now, which is why we like to do our Zooms. We have 1,400 members from around the world. Of course, the majority are in the Asian Pacific region. And as the world is aging, more people are joining us. Membership's free, and there's my email if you'd like me to add you to the listserv. Here is our webinar series. You can tell it's still taking shape. So we're member-driven. Whatever topics are good ideas, please suggest one, or please volunteer to organize a webinar yourself. And that would mean, like Ashish, you call and you get the speakers together, you come up with the topic. I can do the flyer, but Ashish did the flyer. Thank you very much, Ashish. You did it without any help. And but you can see that we have had already this year a webinar on the conference that's coming up in Fukuoka, which I'll talk about in the next slide. This month is Doctors Do Cry. Next month, we will not have a webinar because we're having our conference. And then in April, Sandra Slatter from Australia will be organizing a webinar on respite and green spaces in Australia and the impact on elder health. And then in May, Aaron Guest from Arizona will be hosting one on age-friendly universities. And then in September, we have two individuals who were willing to organize active aging in Taiwan. So June, July, August, if you have a good idea for a webinar, please let us know. So today we have more than 60 registrants from at least 13 countries. So thanks for coming. And you can see we have people registered from France and Africa. Often what they do is they send their bot to record or they watch afterwards because it is, I think, 6 a.m. in France and maybe 5 a.m. in Africa. So I do want to let you know that we are having our 20th anniversary conference in Fukuoka, Japan. This is a picture of Takeo Ogawa, who is also on the call today, and he's our founder of ACAP. And I can't believe, I think we all used to have darker hair, but in over 20 years, we've changed a little bit. But we're very excited to be celebrating. Yeah.
Ya, duduk juga boleh lah, karena ini saya lagi raksa. Ya.
We're very, very happy to be celebrating in Fukuoka coming up. So please join us if you can. Here is a QR code that you can take a picture of, or you can just email me. Registration is open until March 3rd. And if you would like to submit a poster. All posters are accepted. So yeah, you can come. All right, so now I'd like to introduce our moderator, Dr. Ashish Goel, who is a friend of mine that I met in Indonesia one year and through Tribhuti, who is also on the call. And we had a lovely time learning about active aging in Indonesia. But Ashish is the professor and head of medicine at AIMS. He's also a Fulbright Fellow. He was a Fulbright Fellow at Johns Hopkins. He's the immediate past president of the Indian Academy of Geriatrics. And of course, he's multi-talented and very, very interested in the human side of things. I think the last webinar he organized had to do with ethics. So now we are learning about the stories that doctors rarely tell. So I'm going to, second edition. I'm going to turn it over to Ashish. He's going to moderate. There's, I believe, only 8 speakers, not 9, but they have chapters in the book and they're going to share their stories. We'll have then a discussion and some closing remarks. So, Ashish, I'm going to turn it over to you. Thank you so much.
Hi, good morning, good afternoon, good night, good evening, whatever time of the day it is for you. Have a good day. I hope you're having a good day. So thank you, Catherine, for having accommodated us on the ACAP series of webinars. And I do believe that this topic and this subject of today's webinar is very different from what the usual audience is accustomed with, and it might be slightly different. So let me begin in the words of Cat Stevens. He says that I always knew looking back on my tears would bring me laughter, but I never knew that looking back on my laughter could make me cry. And then, of course, this book came up because I had a story to tell, and probably nobody was interested in publishing that story. So we thought, let's try and publish it myself. And then sending mails and messages to people around the world got people, made me realize that probably doctors have stories which they want to tell, but they have never had an opportunity or a chance to tell these. And this book could be a platform to let people get an outlet to tell these stories. So this is, in a sense, how it came together. And I'm so glad that we are here today with the second edition of the book. And some of the people on the webinar today, some of the people who are telling their stories, I have never met them in person, but I have known them deeply through their stories. And that's what connects us and binds us. So to begin, what we will have on this webinar, we'll have people talking without a structure, without any limits. We will have people talking for about 5 odd minutes, and then we will go on to have an open house discussion. So I will invite first Professor Stephen Moffick. Steve is a retired tenured professor of psychiatry from the Medical College of Wisconsin. And during his career, he received many awards for his administrative, clinical, educational, artistic, and journalistic work. And one of these was a one-time designation of being Hero of Public Psychiatry, presented by the Assembly of the American Psychiatric Association. Since retirement, one of his advocacy focus has been the epidemic rate of burnout in physicians in the United States and around the world. So I would also like to say that the cover of the book, the inside cover of the book, is also by one of Steve's good friends who's not with us anymore, Barry Marcus. So probably this book took about 2 decades in coming, and we lost at least 3 contributors who have contributed to this book. And one of those instrumental contributors, integral contributors, was Barry Marcus, who designed the inside cover of the book, but is not with us any longer. So without taking much more time, I would invite Steve to take over and talk to us about your thoughts and whatever you would like to say. Steve.
Yeah, thank you, Ashish. Then we finally meet, even if it's only on Zoom. And I'm so warmed by what you said about my best friend since I was 7 years old, Barry Marcus, and he lived until 77 years old about 2 years ago. And he would love what finally came out for the book. So I want to give you a teeny bit of history about my involvement with the book and my experience crying and bring you up to right now. So I heard about this book project maybe 10 years ago or so. It somehow got to me in an organization. And I thought, oh my, this is really what I need to be involved with because only a month or two before, I had my first episode of crying as a psychiatrist. So I'm going to give you the real short version of what happened, the longer versions in the book. So we had a teenager in Milwaukee who committed suicide of a very prominent family. And some of the leaders in the community decided to have a seminar about suicide and asked me to speak from the point of view of a psychiatrist. And I said, fine. And I wasn't sure what to say. And I decided, well, I'll present my first and only case of a patient committing suicide or who died by suicide. And that may show some empathy for the family for what they're going through. And so this event, this patient who died by suicide, happened when I was a resident, my second year of training in an outpatient clinic. And this was an elderly man. And second visit, I had started prescribing Elavil for his depression, but before the third visit, he actually walked into Lake Michigan and died. Now, I never got this far at the beginning of my presentation to this group. As soon as I opened my mouth about this patient, I started bawling. I mean, just crying and crying. And that had never happened to me before. I was sort of embarrassed. I was looking around for my wife who was in the audience, but I couldn't find her. And I couldn't stop crying. This lasted a couple of minutes. And then all of a sudden, I hear a voice to my side saying, slow down, calm yourself, slow down. And that did the trick. And I restarted and told the whole history of what happened with this patient. And I thought at the time, back in my residency training, I thought I'd be kicked out of residency. I mean, how could I be a psychiatrist if one of my first patients died by suicide? Um, but they were very supportive, said I probably shouldn't have even got this patient. And you know the old saying, you're not a real psychiatrist until you have a patient who commits suicide. Kind of a ghoulish statement, but that goes around. And I think there's some truth to that. So I went on, never had another suicide. But I got interested in a little bit in what was behind all this, because I never had any training about doctors crying or not crying. You know, medical school starts with an autopsy, and you do the not anatomy, you know, cutting the patient, X person up. I think some of us feel like crying at the time or feel like throwing up or something, but we don't. We're sort of taught you control yourself as a doctor. You don't really show your deep feelings. Same thing actually happened when I had my psychiatry training. Nothing about crying, but you know, you have this history of Freud wanting people, psychiatrists, to be a blank screen to their patients that is unknown. And analysts actually sit behind patients, so the patients can't even see the face of the analyst. So even if the analyst was crying a little bit, the patient wouldn't even see it. So that's starting to change now as we get to the present, right? Because self-disclosure due to the internet is kind of opening things up. And there's all these cultural influences about whether, say, men should cry or not. In the United States, certainly it's more common for women to cry than males. But finally, actually, this was right after Ashish told me the book was going to be published. I had my second episode of crying. And I was a discussion for the end of a webinar about psychiatry in Gaza, in Palestine right now, with the war going on. And I followed the psychiatrist from the West Bank, where Palestinians also live, and she takes care of patients there. And then I was asked to comment upon that. And I also started crying again. It wasn't uncontrollable this time around, but I started crying again. I think I was much more prepared because I'd gone through this once, but I felt so bad about what was happening to the patients in Gaza, what was happening to the citizens, and how courageous this particular psychiatrist was. So this has been a really important experience for me. And to correspond to that statement about what makes a real psychiatrist, maybe what makes a real doctor is a doctor who cries. You're a real doctor once you cry about a patient. And it's so important because I think it gets to the depths of our souls. And circumstance certainly makes a difference. It's perhaps easier to cry when you're by yourself, but it also can be therapeutic for patients and families if you can cry in an appropriate situation with them. And my hope for the future is that there's actually a third edition of this book. I think we learn more and more about the value of crying as time goes on. So I think I'll turn it over to our next speaker.
Thank you, Steve. Thank you for that opener. And no, it's cliche. You are not a psychiatrist till the first of your patients commits till your patient commits suicide. That's that kind of strange and yes, thought-provoking. I would go on. We will have an open discussion at the end of the session. And from now, I would go on to Professor Karunakaran Mathiharan. So Professor Mathiharan has been with us, at least associated with the book, and was a considerable support to me when I came out with the first book, which was 21 years ago, in the year 2004. And at that time, I was like a beginner, a novice, did not know how publishing happened. And Dr. Karunakaran supported me so much during that exercise. And the first edition of Doctors Do Cry was published. And he has done his PhD in res ipsa loquitur and its applications in medical negligence cases under Consumer Protection Act in India. He's a professor in the Department of Forensic Pathology. He is now retired, but he was earlier at the University of Malaya Medical Center in Kuala Lumpur in Malaysia, and he worked there till 2016. He founded the Institute of Legal Medicine in India in the year 1996. And again, without taking much more time, I would invite Professor Karunakaran Mathiharan to go on and take the mic as our next speaker.
Good morning. Thank you, Dr. Ashish, for the kind introduction. My thought first goes to what is the connection between doctors and literature? We got ample evidence. The first one that comes to my mind is Somerset Maugham of Human Bondage. It's a semi-autobiographical. The second book that comes to my mind is A.J. Cronin, Adventures in Two Worlds. Of course, Maugham is a qualified medical man, but he never practiced medicine. Cronin, a successful practitioner. In fact, the first page of the book says a medical man and a writer. Adventures in Two Worlds. And the third book I remember is Dr. William Nolan, Making of a Surgeon in 1970. But there are other books also in India as well as in US and other countries. But Doctors Do Cry differs from those books in an important way. That is, those books are individual accounts of medical people. But here, if I take both editions, roughly experiences of 80 doctors and about 13 poems. Again, 93 doctors have come out successfully, describing their personal experiences. When I talk about poets, we cannot forget Keats and Shelley. Of course, they never completed medicine, only medical students. And we are having 13 qualified doctors who have written poems in this. The second thing that comes to my mind is, everybody knows the bedrock of medical practice is doctor-patient relationship. And the two important components of doctor-patient relationship is empathy of the doctors, and the second one is trust of the patient. Those two components have been very well brought out in many of the stories that has been published in this book. When I talk about empathy of the doctors, see, as you all know, our training is partly to practice selective inattention. That is, when we are in the emergency ward or in the clinical side, we don't look into the sufferings. That is, we don't involve ourselves into the sufferings of the patient. We listen to them, but we never react. That is part of our training. So very often doctors are blamed as insensitive because of this training. But here we see so many doctors, that empathy part. Of course, many of them they experienced as a student or as a trainee doctor on the early years of their practice. But after so many decades, they were able to remember and write about it. So that is a very important aspect of this book. Second, trust of the patient. Whenever I say about the trust of the patient, I think about only one important aspect. That is, in Tamil, that is my mother tongue, 1300 years back, there was a small verse which says, "Valal aruthu sudinum மருத்துவன் பால் மாளாத காதல் நோயாளன் போல்." Translation is, even when a doctor performs amputation to the patient implicitly trusts the doctor. This analogy is compared to the love of the devotee to the God. So that is the crux. Still it is in India. That's what I feel many of the stories here tell us. I'm not sure about the Western countries. I've seen it in Malaysia when I was practicing there. So still in Asian countries, this aspect is still there. The trust of the patient. That is more important. If you win the trust of the patient, then you are there. Even something goes wrong, the patient will believe, doctor did something good for me, but it went away. So that's more important. This book, in a way, has brought out the best aspect of the medical profession. Thank you.
Thank you. Thank you, Professor Mathiharan, and thank you for being there and a part of this book for the last 2 decades and more. So let me now invite Professor Subhash Goel. So I have again known Professor Goel for the last 2 decades, and he had his story in the first book as well, which was Who is Mehboob B? And a beautiful story where it's kind of woven into ethos of religion and society and caste, and brings out the human feelings to the best of its ability. Now, Dr. Subhash has been the former dean at the Nizam's Institute of Medical Sciences, which is a prestigious institute in India. He's a neurologist by training and has a deep interest in the human aspect of medicine. He travels regularly to remote areas and to treat patients who have no access to care with compassion. So, Professor Subhash Goel, I invite you to present your views on this subject.
Thank you, Dr. Ashish. I think thank you for inviting me and thank you for making this book, which represents the thoughts of so many of us. Just now, Dr. Karnakuran talked about the doctor-patient relationship. In this doctor-patient relationship, when both are sitting in a cabin, many times it so happens that the patient who is in front of the doctor is intellectually, professionally, educationally much more advanced than the doctor. But just because he has a medical problem, he has to listen to the doctor, right? So I have realized in my practice that even though we have empathy for the patient, which is important, empathy for a patient is a good trait. But sometimes in my experience, I have seen the patients also having empathy for the doctor. And there are some such experiences which have happened in my life. There's a very interesting book. Currently, it's out of print, but I would like to read this book. And if you can get it from somewhere, it's a very interesting title. It says, "We Are All Patients." It's in the Google. It says out of stock, and it's by Barbara Korsch. It says, "We are all patients." At the end of the day, in this world, everybody is a patient, but it's including the doctor. But it's only during a particular doctor-patient interaction that one person is a doctor, one person is a patient. But otherwise, everybody in this world is a patient of something else or the other. My first instance, which I will shortly say, is an elderly patient, Mr. Rao. He came to me with severe osteoarthritis, which means severe knee pain. And I treated him for some time. It didn't get any better. And I told him, "Mr. Rao, it can't go better than this. You have to get operation done. In fact, there is no medical treatment for this beyond this." And just to convince him further, I told him, "Look, my mother also has the same problem which you have. And I tell her also that, Mama, there is no treatment for this." He said, immediately his expression changed. He said, "How dare you tell that to your mother? She made you a doctor and you are telling her there is no treatment for this? Doctor, tomorrow I will give you one medicine. Please give it to your mother." So I just took it casually. And next day, he came with a jar of some ointment, which was, routine, something smelling of menthol or something. He said, "My brother is regularly preparing it, giving it to me, and I feel much better. You give it to your mother." And that's what I did. I gave it to my mother next day. And lo and behold, she felt very better. And she said, "Where from you got it?" And after that, she has been regularly using it. Even today, my mother is now 90 years old, and regularly she asks me, "Where's my medicine?" And the medicine is prepared by my patient, to whom I told there is no treatment. Now he's giving me treatment for my mother. So this is one thing. But the story which I wrote here was about one elderly lady in the city of Hyderabad, where I live in India. This is a multicultural, multi-religious place where we have got people of all faiths and community. So Mehboobi, my elderly, about 85-year-old lady, came from the old city, which is socio-culturally completely different, economically, religiously completely different from me. But she had body aches and pains and all, and I would treat her. And she would not get much better, but still she would come. Probably she wanted somebody to listen to her. And I would spend full 10 to 15 minutes in listening to her. And she was not getting any better. And after some time, her family protested that, "Why are you going to that doctor?" But she continued to come. And every month she would come, and that's fine. I would do my routine, give her some treatment, and she would come. Then one day she asked me that, "Doctor, you look a little disturbed. What's the problem?" I said, "Mehboobi, I got a son who is not speaking. He's 4 years old, but there is delayed speech. He's not speaking, so I'm a little concerned." He said, "Don't worry about it. This is my job. I'll pray to God. I will pray to God and he will definitely speak. I promise you that." And after that, she would regularly come and do some rituals and all that thing. And anyway, it's a long story. And in the meantime, her children, they were not very much interested in her spending money and coming and seeing me. Everybody in her family was up against her to meet me regularly as a patient because she was not getting better also. And on top of that, she was spending so much of money. But she did not care about her society, about her children, about her family. She kept on coming to me. and praying for my son and getting her medicine. Then after a couple of years, my son started speaking fluently. That's not a problem. And one day in the evening, it was a holiday, I got a phone call. He says, I'm your patient's son, Mehboobi's son. I want to inform you that she died last night. And we never wanted her to travel to you to see, but then we know that she held you in high esteem. So it's our duty to inform you that she died. And we'd be very happy if you can join her funeral. We feel that her soul will be happy if she sees you in her funeral. I was shell shocked because, she was part of my life for 10 years or so. So I went out, and it so happened that that day there was a local procession. There was a procession, a religious procession, my religious procession, which is my religion. And it was impossible to travel, but still I tried. I started my car, I went to the main road, but it was impossible. So I missed her procession, which hurt me very deeply. I thought that she was so loyal, she transcended all barriers, but I could not reciprocate it. So I came back very disappointed. And my son, the same son who was not talking before, he asked me, why are you disappointed? What is the problem? I said, see, I could not attend the funeral of Mehboob. Very fluently, impeccably in English, he asked me, who is Mehboob? Who is she? And I was just wonderstruck. I said, here's that lady who prayed day in and day out for his talking, and now he's talking also, but he's asking, who is she? And, instantaneously, I started crying. And I thought that I thought finally, reminded of the same book, that at the end of the day, we are all patients. So this story touched me very deeply. And when Ashish created this project, I just wanted to share it. So thank you very much.
Thank you. Thank you, Professor Subhash Kaul, for that very touching and moving story once again. And I have always been fascinated by this story since the first time I ever read it way back in 2004. Let me go on to our next speaker, Dr. Vijay Rajput. So once again, a few days ago, I was speaking with Vijay, and we were trying to remember what connected us in the first place. And both of us have been in touch over the last 21 years. And we finally decided we've probably forgotten of what connected us in the first place. And then probably it was this book. And my first email reaching out to him to contribute to this book was what connected us in the first place. And it has been a beautiful friendship over the last 21 years. Something which not only I have benefited from, but so many of my students in turn have benefited from this association and friendship. So Vijay is the chair of medical education at Nova Southeastern University in Florida, and he's recognized for his passion of teaching at the bedside and as a stand-up humor and his humanism, which is a leading into patient-centered discussions. So let me have you on. Vijay, all yours.
Thank you, Ashish. So I will make it a little bit more fun, even though the day where this happened, I was crying. But after 32 years now, I can laugh at what happened that day. So I grew up in India. I did med school in India. I did general surgery in India. And then life changed, and I went to United States 33 years ago in February. And I thought I speak English very well. And there was a first day of my internship in Philadelphia. As an intern, I am on the floor, and I was asked to see a patient. And I go into the patient's room, and I started, like a general, you take a history and physical. And I asked my patient the first question. And I said, okay, patient was a syncope, but I didn't know. And the patient said, doctor, I passed out last night. Now, it's interesting. It makes easy to understand passed out at this point. But when you grew up in India, I've never heard passed out. Only thing I knew passed away, or you passed away means you are dead. So I said, oh, this is interesting. This person is saying he's passed out. And I said, okay, let me just take a further more history. Because I knew I can speak pretty good English. I take some more history, like routinely ask about nausea, vomiting, diarrhea, just general routine question. And the patient say, just before passing out, I also threw up that day, last night, and I threw up. Again, this is called in baseball language a curveball, which I can use that word now, curveball. But I didn't know what is threw up, because if you grew up in India, the only two words I knew was puke and vomiting. I had no clue what throwing up means. And I said, gee, this is interesting. I've been pretty well trained. I know my English well. And here I'm in Philadelphia, and I just not understanding what patient is telling me. And I said, okay, this is really going to be a tough time. And so I walk out of the room, and first thing I see a nurse, and I asked the nurse, and I said, listen, I think I'm a little bit difficulty getting this history from the patient. And the nurse was very funny, and she said, do not bother me. I have a bad hair day. Now, you have to understand what is a bad hair day means. I look at her hair. They are pretty well groomed, and her hair was nothing wrong about her hair. And I said, gee, this is really a third curveball, and I don't know this, we call a third strike in a baseball. And I said, oh, that's it. So this is really a nuances of language, of culture. And I thought, gee, I knew pretty well. And on the very first day of United States, and I thought I was already a surgeon, and I did medicine, and I'm here struggling with understanding the patient. And it makes me to really understand that it takes time to know where we are and what part of the country. It doesn't matter what language you know. And what I realized that the way I could figure that out is really understanding the local people's food, sports, culture, and how they live. And I intentionally put an effort in Philadelphia. I mean, as you know, but we are pretty crazy about our NFL or a football, or we are crazy about our basketball or because of the baseball. And if you go in a patient room, you usually can have a pretty good conversation what happened with the game that night. So it's that day evening, I was pretty shocked, because I said, gee, this is not going to happen. I might have to go back to India and continue my plastic surgery fellowship, which I intended to do it. But after that, I realized that it is, you just have to figure it out, how you find your cultural humility and humbleness and try to learn from the people. So that's my own personal story. I didn't write that story in the book. My two stories are very different. But I will end with a couple of more comments, because I heard the words people have been talking about empathy. And so I will just bring it in. At least I'm a very United States centric, even though I grew up in India, but now I'm 32 years, I'm United States, so I cannot speak what's happening in India. But in the United States, we've been teaching empathy to our students for the last 20, 25 years, and we've been into teaching empathy. And we are teaching up to the level that we can make our students to fake empathy, and they're not genuinely empathetic. And I really feel lately that what is really need to be teach is compassion and kindness. So let me just spend a couple of minutes about what compassion and kindness. Because empathy is pretty much your cognitive response, that what you think you are experiencing, what patient is going through. You are not really trying to alleviate, or at least even a desire to alleviate that person's suffering. Compassion is, in a very simplistic way, is empathy with action. That's compassion. And in medicine, empathy alone is not good enough in my mind. You have to have a little bit desire to alleviate that somebody's suffering. Now, so I really believe compassion is the way to go, and we need to teach. But at the same time, the kindness is the one we really have ignored. And we don't even think, we think our students and our doctors are very kind. And I will tell you, now, So let me explain what is kind, because when I ask my students, what's the difference between compassion and kindness, half the people will not be able to tell me what's the difference. Kindness, you don't need any emotional attachment with that person in front of you. There is no reason. You just need some sort of benevolent gesture or action to help that person without any connection and emotional attachment. It can be as simple as opening the door or holding the door or getting a glass of water for my patient, or getting a urinary bottle for my patient where patient is just waiting to get it from the medical assistant, or opening up the breakfast tray or a milk carton or a juice box. As simple as it is. We don't do that. We don't even show kindness to our colleagues. So my end of the day, I think I'm all love this book, but I will love to spread this message that we need to spread and learn and teach more about kindness to each other. And the kindness also connected to issue of civility, which is another bigger problem in the world, that we just do not show civility among each other. We show micro incivility among each other. We show micro aggression among each other, and we micromanage each other all the time. So I will stop here. My really message is that a lot of time you feel that the cultural humility and humbleness is very critical, important. And I would like to spread more message of Dalai Lama to be more kind to each other and just get out of this. Empathy alone is not good enough. We need to show compassion and kindness. So thank you for listening to me, and thank you, Ashish.
Thank you, Vijay. And we have 4 more speakers on the panel, and I'll move on to the next speaker, who has been a dear colleague to me for the last 15 years. Professor Alpana is a professor of medicine at University College of Medical Sciences in New Delhi, and she's been exposed to a plethora of emotions and comes across as a very emotional and kind doctor who resorts to the pen when overwhelmed by emotions. Dr. Alpana. You would have to unmute yourself. You are muted.
So thank you, Ashish. And thank you, everyone, for showing interest in our book, Doctors Do Cry. While the book largely revolves around the emotional turmoils which doctors do face when they are in relationships with their patient, but I would like to share a story wherein the emotional turmoil was generated because of a doctor-doctor relationship, or rather, I would say a teacher-student relationship. So it isn't very far back. It was in year 2018, and a lot of people here today would probably remember. It was a cold, damp winter morning, and I was awakened by the sound of my cell phone ringing. A pretty normal feature for a physician of a busy hospital to rise up like this. But what was not normal was the near hysterical voice of my resident, who was practically shrieking, "Ma'am, please come soon. He is no more." And all of my why, when, how, they were all drowned in that familiar numbness which I have when I'm aggrieved beyond the measure of words. It was very unbelievable that the resident whom I was talking an evening before was discussing his thesis protocol, got consumed by his own darkness. And I was so overwhelmed that I always took myself to be so sensitive, and yet I could not see this coming. Why could not I perceive this? With all these thoughts and with a very heavy heart, I reached the hospital. And mind you, I'm telling you for a fact that it took a lifetime's courage to reach to the mortuary to see him there. And there he lay, bare, in that ice-cold stainless steel drawer of the mortuary. And my first instinct was, please cover him. He's going to catch a cold. But then, the next moment I realized he's no longer going to catch a cold. So yes, as Dr. Goel said, doctors are also patients, and doctors do cry. And I now believe that doctors who do not learn to cry and who do not cry out loud and long do have the potential to leave people who really loved them in their lifetime to keep crying all through their lives. So this poem was written on the same very day, and I was very reluctant to make any changes to it, even for the sake of getting it published in this book. So I would like to present a few paragraphs from this poem. And in this poem, I implore, as the mother of that student whom I lost. My poem is titled Peekaboo. When you boarded for the first time the train on your own, I thought it was time to relax at home. No longer would there be tiffins to make. No longer would there be games to play. I thought by now you were tall and strong, but you always loved to prove me wrong. You still wanted to play peekaboo. You still wanted to hide away too. Only the corners were darker, the whispers were bare. You wanted me to find you, but I failed to see you there. I thought I saw. I thought I felt a breath adrift. I brushed aside all thoughts of you. Oh, why would you still play peekaboo? To see you grin and to see you smile, I've lost to you on countless times. This time, for once, please let me win too, in this game of life, which you call peekaboo. So my only message is that please keep your eyes open. Do not create walls, because he'll keep looking over his shoulder until he takes that final call. We are all patients, as Sir said. And yes, we do carry our own baggages. We have to be available. We have to be around, because only means serve the end. And these stories, which we have seen in this book, these poems which people have contributed, would not happen if we do not have doctors. Thank you.
Thank you, Dr. Alpana. And yes, very true that a priest without temptation is not as half as good a priest, and a doctor who has not cried cannot understand suffering the way patients do. Let me move on to Dr. Ashwin Panda. So Ashwin is a neurologist in Delhi and has written scripts for drama, and he's choreographed fashion shows. He's a debater, a passionate teacher, and certainly truly a multi-dimensional personality who lives life completely to the fullest. He's just been back from a pilgrimage of sorts, when he visited the largest pilgrimage that happens in India once every 14 years. And this time it was special because it was happening after 100 years. So Ashwin, the stage is all yours.
Thank you, sir. Greetings from New Delhi to all who've joined in the middle of the night. I'm Dr. Ashwin. It's an honor to be speaking in context of the illustrious contributors, who have contributed towards this book. I would like to thank Ashish sir, obviously, for the opportunity to at least let me write my emotions and my story in the book, and also the tireless effort that is put in to make it a reality. As doctors, our lives revolve around books, and we know that we seek guidance from them whenever we want. And most of us, not only in our medical lives, but for other purposes, also seek guidance from other books once we realize their importance, that one book is one lifetime, and when you read multiple books, you read multiple lifetimes and gain the experience to, contemplate, improve, and act upon in your life. So some wonderful experiences were shared, and a few things that I wanted to speak about have been touched by Dr. Vijay. Compassion and kindness. Dr. Subhash talked about how we all are, in a sense, patients, and how we should be empathetic towards the needs of the patients. Dr. Alpana has talked about being available for people coming out of our own mazes. So when I asked Ashish sir, he told me to speak. I asked him, what is the mandate? He said, no mandate. So that indirectly, it's saying be yourself. And I think this reply makes this talk even more tough, because to be yourself without an external agency To be to be true to your innate self is a tough philosophical exercise and goal. And me being at the crossroads, not being young to be dismissed outrightly and not too experienced to be taken seriously, I think I will give this a try. I'll call this the discovery of self because the book is wonderful in a sense that you can pick it up. I was talking to Kathy before other people joined in that you can pick it up and open any story, read, and get involved in the emotion and the time frame that the doctor was in. So, doctor's life's kind of revolves around various techniques that are mentioned in books like Bhagavad Gita to Osho and Buddha to Oprah Winfrey, in a sense that it gives you a vantage point to improve yourself. So the core ideas like Dr. Vijay was talking about, compassion, kindness, empathy, others have talked about realizing other people's pain. But the stories written in the book share a spectrum of emotions from happiness to sadness, laughter to tears. I remember reading a story about how a patient was, of mixed edema, and he was kept in a mortuary, and then he banged his door and the doctors became scared, happy to find that the patient was alive. So from laughters to tears, from comfort to fear, from intuition of what is wrong to disclosure of what went wrong. There was a story about how while operating, a portion of the skull bone fell down and the doctor thought whether to put it back, to tell it to the patients what to do. So from intuition to disclosure. And I think all of us have to go through these emotions if they have not gone through. So what it kind of teaches us that there is this kind of futility to attachment to these emotive changes and to convert them into temporal truths, but rather one should kind of experience them, learn them, and move on for a new experience. This theme can be reflected in stories at chapter 2, 7, 8 of the book. Some stories reflect the theme of immersive care and some of inadvertent mistakes that happened, as doctors are humans too, and nobody is infallible. So it kind of teaches us, and the results were entirely opposite. You treat very passionately, patient does not make it. There is some inadvertent mistakes, but it turns out to be nice. So it's kind of teaching you the act of karma in a sense that you should be passionate about the work that you do, but you should be dispassionate about the results. Take the results in your stride, move on. And this finds credence in the chapter 3, where its topic is suspicion. We need to be suspicious about things that come across to you in life. Then, as I was talking earlier, it takes many a lifetimes to transcend one's innate weakness. Say, for example, anger. Some people have that issue, short-temperedness, anger. So it takes you immense amount of experiences to suppress that thing and move out of it. And a doctor's life, as shown in many stories, have taught valuable lessons. As Dr. Vijay was talking about, how to incorporate yourself into a culture. How do you know that? When you get into that scenario, you understand that. So numerous such interactions with different lives hastens the speed of transcendence, making oneself more aware. Last, before I make my closing comments, I like to share a story. After my MD from Delhi, I chose that I thought I'll take a sabbatical. I moved to the islands, Andaman Nicobar Islands. It's an island at the south of a country, which is around 1900 kilometers away from mainland. I was doing my residency job there. The island is home to few indigenous tribes who are not part of the normal life. They don't wear clothing, they don't have their houses, they speak a different language. So those patients, when they are brought to the hospital, they have a special ward, and for a doctor to go and see them, the translator needs to interact with you, and then the patient gives a certificate, yes, this doctor is someone that I would want to interact with. And then you get a pass, and then you can see or treat the patient. So one such incident happened with me. There was a young woman who just delivered a child, and she had an altered sensorium. I was rather called, and I was taken. The interactions that I had with the translator, of course, could not reach the patient, but the expressions that I had, the way that I conducted myself probably led to that young woman given assent to the fact that, yes, I can treat her. That day, and during the phase of those 10 days when I couldn't use language, the worst form of expression in human beings, as far as I'm concerned, when I couldn't use language and I could use my emotions, the feeling of the hand, that day I felt that doctor is something more than medicine. It deals with healing, and that kind of uh, flipped the switch in my head. And so I would say, and I'll end by saying that Albert Einstein said that there are only two ways to live your life. I hope he said that. Many of quotes are attributed to him. So Albert Einstein said that there are two ways to live your life. One is though nothing is a miracle. The other is though everything is a miracle. So for me, Doctors Do Cry, the book, is a philosophical exercise which tells and shows that yes, life is a miracle. 64 authors have kind of testified to the fact. You should enjoy it, live it to the fullest with amazement, awareness, passion, and detachment. Thank you, sir, for the wonderful opportunity to speak and, of course, write in the book. Thank you so much for your patient hearing.
Thank you, Ashwin. Thank you for those brilliant thoughts and sharing your experiences. We move on to the penultimate speaker for this evening, morning, day. Dr. Abhishek, he's the founder of Organum Donum. This is a society which is involved with organ donation in India, and he's dedicated to medical excellence and public health advocacy. He's a guest speaker and advisor in many capacities, and I have known him for the last entire decade. Dr. Abhishek Garg, stage is all yours.
Thank you, sir, for giving me the opportunity to speak here. And well, so how I begin associating with Dr. Ashish was he was my professor during my undergrad days, and he was one of the professor who we were all fear of. Like, okay, it's sir's class, we all have to attend it because it's Dr. Ashish coming to take the class. And there was just one experience that I used to write something here and there on the social media, and one fine day I wrote a poem on a social media, and Dr. Ashish like just commented, "Meet me in my room." I was so scared. I was like, "Oh my God, I am doomed today, and I have to go to Dr. Ashish, and it must be something bad that I have done in the college, in my assignments or something like that." But I think that was the life-changing experience for me as an author, as a writer as well, because those 15 minutes of interaction with Dr. Ashish and then discussing about Doctors Do Cry, the project, he said that I found something that you should write on the empathetic experiences during your days of your college life or the interactions with the patients. So we were just sharing about an incident. So I was not a doctor that back then. So my contribution in the book is as a student, not as a doctor. So there was one case which I was observing with my dad, and it was an intellectual disability case. So when I was discussing about that case, it was like, okay, so when a patient who has an intellectual disability comes to your clinic, the patient is actually not of the chronological age, and the chronological age and the mental age doesn't match together. So if you see that patient from like inside your clinic, before seeing the case, you just see the emotions, the expressions, the voices that actually rejuvenates with the interactions with that patient. And when you actually do that, you have to experience that the body that you see is actually different from the emotions that you hear. And that is what I was able to pen down. And the realization was that tears are not actually should be considered as a sign of weakness. Like as a doctor, we are always in an authoritative position. We always used to say that, okay, this is what I'm going to advise, and the patient is going to listen to me. But tears should not be taken as a weakness. Rather, I think this is an expression of a soul's journey towards self-realization. If we cannot cry, if we cannot understand the empathetic experiences that we are having in our day-to-day clinical life, we cannot call ourselves as a doctor. Because if we say that a doctor should always be a expressionless face and a person who cannot actually empathetically relate to a patient, then we first reject the idea of interacting with the patient and making a strong patient-doctor relationship. And that is what came to life when I was talking about the story that I penned down. So a patient who is like 28 years old, but behaving like a 5 years old child, having many fractures, many injuries, many scars, because the intellectual disability doesn't help him interact with the society the person should interact at the chronological age. So when you see that patient, it is not just the patient that you are seeing, it is a whole family. Because whole family's emotions, life, 2 decades are invested in that particular patient. When we were talking about that case, and the patient just came to us with a fractured hand, and when we talked about to the mother regarding that case, it is the mother who was talking more than the patient. And mother was like, okay, when we rear a child, we actually capture the moments of all the smiles when we were a child, the first smile, the first walk, the first day of school. And she started talking to us like, I remember the first day my child fell off the bed. I remember his first scar. I remember his first fracture at the age of 5. I remember the first day at the age of 12 when he tried to attempt a suicide. So all those emotions transfers inside us, and we were able to walk through the journey, what the mother was going through. And as the technician, when we were about to, what do you want for your child? The only thing she told us was, Doctor, can you please kill our son? And we were like shocked. Like, this is the worst thing that a mother can ask. Like, just give euthanasia to my child. And when she was talking about that, she just blabbered and just started talking reckless about why I want to kill my child. Don't take me like a criminal, or don't criminalize my actions. It is not that I want to kill my child because I'm a criminal, or I'm a monstrous man. I want to kill my child because I cannot see him crying every day. I cannot actually experience all those emotions that my child is going through. My child is dying every particular day. Every day there is a new incident that is happening in his life, and I cannot see him suffering anymore. I want to end those sufferings. And if there is a chance, if you can actually alleviate those sufferings, I would really respect you if you can do that. And as a physician, when my dad was treating him, he just uttered nothing. He just said that, okay, let us handle the fracture first. We'll talk about other things later. And while he was just writing the prescription, a tear rolled down his eye, and he said that sometimes it is good enough to give words to our eyes and in the form of tears, rather to actually say some words to the patient. So it is like I spoke the unspoken words. The tears are actually the expression which a doctor was going through, and he was not able to actually express those emotions as well. And I think this book, Doctors Do Cry, is actually a compilation of all those empathetic experiences, some joy, some of the cries, some of the laughter, all those experiences that we have. It is actually a compilation of all those experiences that a doctor or a student might feel while interacting with those patients. This is what is important, that actually taking into a dive of the lives of the patients that we are treating. It should never be that we are just seeing the patient as a patient. It is a life that we are touching. When with every experience, we are touching a life. And there might be many experiences in our lives that we might feel that these are the heart touching experiences. And I was listening to all those stories with the worthy speakers here. Some experiences which happened with us 3 decades ago or 4 decades ago. I'm not even 3 decades old. So I feel that will we be able to even recall all those experiences? We are able to recall those experiences because they actually touched our heart. And that is what is important, that if something is touching your heart, it should touch millions of hearts out there. And this book is actually going to touch millions of hearts out there. And the empathetic experience that we have, and the empathy that needs to inculcate in medical education is very important in India, I think. And if policymakers agrees, I think this would be one teaching object that should be used in medical schools to teach empathy to the students as well. This is more important. And before this final, submitting my final expressions, there is a shlok in Mahabharata that is said that na toham kamay rajyam, na swargam na punarbhavam, kamay duk tapta nam pranina martinashna. It translates as na toham kamay rajyam. I do not desire a kingdom. Na swargam na punarbhavam, nor rebirth and not heaven. Kamaya duk tapta nam pranina martinashram. All I desire is the will and the power to end suffering of all the living forms. So I think this is more important, that we should be able to have those powers, that we are able to end suffering of all the mankind, and all those experiences that we share, we should share not just with our inner self, but with the world outside there, so that we can have a more empathetic world, and a world where crying is not seen as a sign of weakness, rather a sign of willingness. Okay. Thank you, sir.
Thank you. Thank you, Dr. Garg. Thank you for those insightful thoughts and the quotes from Mahabharata. And we go on to our final speaker for the day. After that, we will have an open house. Dr. Deepanjali Chaudhary. So Deepanjali is a pediatric allergic specialist working at the Amersham Hospital in England. She's a fan of writings of Rabindranath Tagore, and she enjoys her old love of pen whenever she needs to unwind. So again, I have known Deepanjali through this book over the last more than 2 decades, and she had her story in the first edition of the book, and she carried it on into the next edition as well. Deepanjali, the floor is all yours.
Thank you, Ashish, for this introduction. And I just want to say that it has made me feel so lovely being part of this book with all lovely doctors and their experiences. And the one thing that comes out of this book, Doctors Do Cry, is the feelings of compassion. And if I was ever to rename this book, I would call it as Colors of Compassion, because every author, every specialist involved in the writing of this book has conveyed this through the stories that we have seen in this book. And just like Dr. Rajput mentioned, of empathy with action. And that is something that we all, need to take it forwards in our lives, in our careers. And the one thing that touches us very deeply in the form of this book is how we carry ourselves as doctors in every walk of life. And that's one thing that we have done, very well with this book. Reading this book brings out so many emotions that have been conveyed beautifully. And I want to thank you for, compiling this in a book. And the one thing I did want to say is I obviously, did my medical education in India and then came to England, trained as a family physician to start with before moving on to pediatric allergy. But studying as a family doctor, we had to learn empathy. We had to learn empathic, communication. And that is one thing that was not taught right from the beginning of my training in India. And that possibly, I don't know if that has changed, but that is one thing that we all need to possibly propagate into our, future younger generation of doctors that are coming along. And my story was a story that I feel very deeply nostalgic about because that was my first taste of suffering, that I actually saw live. I used to hear stories of the dowry system. Now, for audiences who don't know about the dowry system, it is something which is sadly part of the Indian society from the olden times, where the bride's family has to offer something to the groom's family, and in some cases, this used to land up with violence and the bride being burnt for financial reasons. Now, my story was that connection I had with my patient who was actually burnt alive. Certainly, it was an attempt that was carried out, and the feelings she went through, my feelings as a junior doctor, that was almost my first night shift where I had to deal with this girl and then, follow her through her recovery. And that to me really felt a completely different level of emotion and feelings that it brought along. And yeah, all I want to say is do read the book and enjoy all our stories that have been written. And I just want to say that, yes, as doctors, we don't play God, but maybe we are the middle person here, maybe we're here in this profession to make that special change, to make that special connection where we can possibly be that presence in a patient's life. Thank you.
Panel of speakers in the first round. And I don't know, Catherine, do you think we can open the house for any comments, any thoughts, or anything that the audience wants to say
Yes,
before we close the session?
I think we have to open for some comments. I mean, I am just blown away by the snippets of stories that I've heard tonight, and I can't wait to get my hands on the book so I can read the whole thing. And I'm so happy to know this is a second edition, which means there might be a third edition at some point, because you're still quite young, Ashish. So I'm going to hold you to it. But yes, please. Are there any comments or questions from the floor?
I saw there was a hand raised by Balambal on
Yes.
by
Okay.
Bala.
All right. Dr. Bala, do you have anything to add? You're on mute right now. Yeah, I don't know if you should unmute Dr. Bala. Uh-oh. I think she's talking. Dr. Bala, can you hear us? We cannot hear you. We cannot hear you. Can you unmute yourself? In the lower.
Now?
Yes, perfect. Now we can hear you. Yes.
Thank you. Thank you. No, the doctors cry because all the time the patients were crying, inactive, and they are unconscious and they are not able to respond. That is a part. But why and when doctors cry, they don't cry openly, but inwardly they do, perhaps. It is possible because we find there may be two occasions in which the doctors may cry. That is when there is no proper cooperation from the patient. They may be feeling very bad. In spite of their effort to recover this patient from the illness, why they are not cooperating? So inwardly the doctors cry that once. Secondly, the doctors cry when so much of efforts have been made by the doctor. In spite of it, you find that the patient dies. So why it happens? They feel. So they cry unconsciously and unknowingly it comes to them also. So in that way, the doctors should be very much appreciated for the hard work they do. But at the same time, why it happens? Why in spite of my beautiful patient's approach, why my patient is not recovering? That feeling may be there with every doctor. But still we find that go ahead. That's why. So I find that doctors need not cry because they are next to God, we feel. So it is okay. No problem. So we find that there is no problem at all. We find that God is there to help.
Thank you. Thank you so much for that. That was so great. Okay, we have at least two hands. Sudhir, I see your hand, and Gayan. So Sudhir first, and then Gayan.
I'm not a doctor, first of all, nor am I in any medical profession. So, good evening from US to all of you. Some good mornings, some good afternoons. I'm here because the respect I have for the medical profession, that is one reason. Second is that Ashish is my brother, younger brother. And I'm quite happy for him, although I have not read the book because I have not actually received the book yet. I'll be making an attempt. I'm sorry, my camera seems to be not working right now. Refresh your browser. Anyway, so my voice is limited, as you can probably feel, all of you. And this is because of some action which doctors had to take on my throat. And they removed my part of my voice box. So I'm able to make some noise is a blessing. The prognosis on the table was that I will not be able to speak for the rest of my life. But I'm able to speak, which is a miracle. And this discovery was made by Ashish that I have a problem in my throat. This was actually, we just met and we were talking to each other. And he noticed there was some change in my voice. And that's where my discovery was made. And the rest of it is, of course, a long story. So the respect for the medical profession has been there, is always there, but I am one of those rare human beings who survived a big operation like this. But at the same time, when I heard all of the esteemed doctors in this panel, I feel so happy that doctors also have emotions. Because most of the time, as a patient, my feelings were that the doctors have no emotions. They just treat the patients as their professional life would every day, because they see so many of patients suffering that they develop an immunity to emotions or sufferings of the patients, which is not true, of course, for the esteemed panel, which I have just now heard. And I hope that this book will do wonders and probably reach out to the doctors who are probably, I don't want to accuse anyone here, but there are some doctors who are too busy in their commercial exercises, and they bring some disrepute to this profession, which is a pain for patients like me and for the general public. So I wish all the best for this book, and I hope this the Dr. Goel, Dr. Garg, and the ideas which have come through will probably go through the medical teachings and empathy, compassion, and these kind of emotions will be also generated in the future generations of doctors coming out. Thank you very much for patiently listening to my broken voice.
Thank you so much. Thank you so much. I really do agree. Okay, Gian, I see your hand.
Thank you so much. First of all, I would like to clarify that I am not a doctor, but I'm a psychologist. And I have experienced this, that especially with this couple of conference which I have been attending through online related to aging, all age-related issues and other things, what it has been over a period of time, it has been organized by the esteemed agencies and the scholars who are here. My respect to each and every person who is attending here. A lot of respect for the medical profession. But I have personally felt throughout my career, and I'm basically an academician and practitioner as a psychologist, I have found that doctors, yes, they do need psychological, support. I'll give you one very personal example that one of my uncle, he is 99 years old, doctor, and he feels more comfortable talking with me, sharing with me, and he is far away. I come from India, from Hyderabad, and my uncle is staying in Bihar. And very frequently we discuss, we share, and we chat on various issues. And I have found that he feels very comfortable by getting emotional support at this age of his life. And that is the reason I say medical profession is definitely a very noble profession. But apart from that, as the book which is being discussed here, Doctors Do Cry, it may not be evident physically, but yes, the emotions are there. So that is the way I always feel that along with that, the psychological angle, the emotional angle is very much important in life. And it has to go together. We cannot say that it is separate and we need to look into a different way. So with this, I don't want to take much time, and I would like to continue because my interest is always in the area of aging because of my personal experience as well as in the surroundings, what I see. So with this, thank you so much, and great experience knowing so many things here in the conference.
Yeah. And thank you, Gian. I know you've attended many ACAP webinars, so thank you for your support of that. Okay, I see Tamara, and then I see Sushil doing this. So wait, let's do Tamara first.
Hello, everyone. I am from Sri Lanka, and my background is a nurse, and currently I'm working as a lecturer in nursing. So thank you very much for this wonderful opportunity. And I just would want to convey not only doctors do cry, nurses also cry. So I have been throughout my career, I have found many instances that nurses do cry. Nurses also feel the sympathetic and the very emotional feelings while working as nurses. And as one speaker mentioned, they cry inside, in their inside. So cannot see it visibly, but sometimes as nurses, I also had many experiences crying, go out from the patient's unit and go to somewhere, hide and cry, or sometimes make very effort to not to not let tears to come in front of the patient. So though in our curriculum and the training also we have this therapeutic relationship, empathy, compassionate care, trust, how to build trust between the patient and the nurse and all, I also feel we need to put more emphasis on training our students. During their training, they should get to know more about this kind of situation, how to face and how to handle, how to make it in a more empathetic way like that. That's what I want to say. So nurses also have this kind of thing. So that's what I would like to talk to you, because my background is also from nursing. Thank you very much. Thank you.
Thank you. That was fabulous. Fabulous. Okay. Sushil, you had a
Yes,
question.
ma'am. Hello, everyone. This has been a very nice opportunity for all of us to contribute to this excellent work. And I believe it's like totally non-commercial. The thing is, I wish that it doesn't stay in a small community, so that I would request everybody to send a copy of this to the respective universities to which they are affiliated, irrespective of whether medical or any other fields, so that this becomes a part of curriculum in different departments. From my side, I'm going to do that. I'm going to send it to different universities with which I have been associated, and to see that it is widely encompassed by people in different spheres of life. That's all. Thank you, Dr. Ashish and the team, for giving us this opportunity. Thank you.
Thank you. That was terrific. Yes. And so we have recorded this, and we will be posting our recording on our YouTube channel. So if you've ever gotten an email from me, you can scroll down and you can find the link to the YouTube channel, or you can just write to me at kbraun@hawaii.edu, and I can, let you know whatever, link you to whatever. So happy to see everybody, and thank you all for coming. Ashish, this was great. Ashish, I asked him at the last minute, well, what about you, Ashish? Can you do the February webinar? And of course he said yes. And so thank you so much. And Tribhuti, I think you have something to
Hi,
say.
Catherine. Thank you so much. I just want to say that this is amazing. Congratulations to Ashish for the book, Doctors to Cry. And I wish that doctor will not to cry anymore. Because with empathy, compassion, and action, then doctor will not cry anymore. Okay? Do you agree, Ashish? Thank you so much
Thank you. Thank you,
everybody who share experiences, very passionate experiences that make me, aware that how hard is being a doctor. Thank you so much.
Yeah.
See you in
Thank you.
Fukuoka.
Thank you,
Catherine.
Propri. And there is an invitation. Yeah, there's an
Hello.
invitation from
Yeah, thank
Catherine to
you.
all the doctors who spoke on this webinar for a next symposium on the book at Hawaii. So she will let us know the dates when we can travel to Hawaii and have a symposium in Hawaii. Thank
Oh
you.
yeah, I want
Oh,
to
we
go
all
to
like to
Hawaii
come.
again.
Okay.
Okay.
All right, gang.
Okay, see you
Thank
in
you so
Hawaii
much.
then.
What a wonderful webinar. Thank you all. This
Okay.
is terrific.